My promotion party. We have a problem, my boss said. When I saw what was on his desk, I knew my career was over. Story 1. They say you can't outrun your past, but I thought I'd done a damn good job of trying. I grew up in Mill Ridge, Pennsylvania, a town so small and forgotten that even its ghosts probably packed up and left decades ago. It wasn't the kind of place anyone stayed in by choice. The factory shut down long before I was born, leaving nothing but cracked pavement and broken promises. My dad worked odd jobs, my mom cleaned houses, and I swore to myself every night as a kid that I'd get out of there no matter what it took. And I did. Fast forward 20 years, and I was standing on the brink of everything I'd worked for. I had a steady job at Greystone Logistics in Pittsburgh, climbing the corporate ladder with my nose to the grindstone and my eyes on the prize. That day was supposed to be my victory lap, my promotion to regional director. Drinks with the team, a toast to my hard work, and maybe even a chance to breathe for once. But life doesn't play fair, does it? The day started off like any other. I woke up to the sunlight streaming through my apartment window. My girlfriend, Opal, was already in the kitchen, making coffee. She had one of those chipper morning moods that never quite made sense to me. "Big day today, huh?" she said, grinning over her mug. "I told you they'd pick you. You've got that unstoppable vibe." I smiled back, but my stomach was in knots. It wasn't that I didn't think I deserved the promotion. I'd been grinding harder than anyone else on my team for years. But there was this small voice in the back of my head whispering that it was all too good to be true. I'd learned a long time ago that when life hands you a gift, there's usually a catch. By the time I got to the office, the energy was electric. Coworkers kept shooting me little smiles and nods, and I could feel the weight of their expectations. My boss, Horace Mundy, had been dropping hints all week that I was the guy for the job. Horace wasn't the warm and fuzzy type. He was the kind of man who chewed his cigars and kept a flask of scotch in his desk drawer. But he respected hard work, and I'd proven myself more times than I could count. At 11:45 a.m., Horace called me into his office. I figured he wanted to do some quick pre-announcement chat, maybe give me a rundown on what to expect moving forward. Instead, the look on his face stopped me dead in my tracks. "Fitz," he said, his voice lower than usual. "We have a problem." I felt my stomach drop, but I forced myself to stay calm. "What kind of problem?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. My hands started sweating before he even opened it. He slid it across the desk to me and leaned back in his chair, watching me with a hard expression. "Take a look," he said. I hesitated, then flipped it open. The first thing I saw was a photo. It was blurry, grainy, like it had been taken on a cheap camera phone. A man sitting at a bar, drink in hand. At first, I didn't recognize him. Then I saw the next photo, and the next, and my blood ran cold. It was me. There were at least a dozen pictures in that folder. One of me shaking hands with a man in a dark alley. Another of me slipping what looked like an envelope into someone's pocket. In one of them, I was standing outside a seedy-looking building with a sign I didn't recognize. Every photo was timestamped, and every timestamp told a story I couldn't explain. "This isn't what it looks like," I said immediately, my voice shaking. Horace raised an eyebrow. "What exactly does it look like, Fitz? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been involved in some shady dealings behind our backs." No, I swear, I don't even know where these were taken. This isn't me." He leaned forward, his massive hands folded on the desk. "Do you think I'm stupid? Someone went through a lot of trouble to get these, and they didn't just end up on my desk by accident. So tell me the truth, or we're going to have a much bigger problem." I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, and my mind was racing a mile a minute. Who had taken these? Why? And how the hell was I supposed to prove they weren't real? The man in the photos looked like me, same build, same haircut, even the same damn suit I wore to work sometimes. But I knew for a fact I'd never been to half the places in those pictures. "I don't know who sent these," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "But they're not real. I swear, Horace. You've known me for years." "I wouldn't." "I thought I knew you," he cut in, his tone sharp. "But this? This doesn't exactly scream trustworthy employee." I felt my mouth go dry. This wasn't just about the promotion anymore. My entire career was hanging by a thread, and I had no idea how to fix it. If Horace believed these photos, I was done. Not just at Greystone, but in the entire industry. My reputation would be ruined. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" he asked, his voice cold. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. My mind was blank, and all I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. I was screwed. That's when he dropped the second bombshell. "There's more," he said, pulling another folder from his drawer. This one was thicker, heavier. He slid it across the desk with the same careful precision, like it was a grenade he didn't want to detonate. "What now?" I muttered, my hands trembling as I opened it. Inside were emails. Dozens of them, printed out in neat little rows. Every single one was from my work account, and every single one made me look like I'd been running some kind of side hustle using company resources, fake invoices, shady transfers, and correspondence with names I didn't recognize. "This isn't me," I said, my voice cracking. "I didn't send these." I stared at the emails, my mind spinning. My name was on every one of them. The timestamps were there. The language was professional, like something I'd write. But I knew I hadn't sent them. Someone had gone out of their way to frame me, and they'd done a damn good job. "This isn't me," I repeated, but it sounded weak even to my own ears. Horace just stared at me, his jaw tight, the lines on his face deeper than ever. He didn't believe me. Why would he? "You've got an hour to clear out your desk," he said finally. "Security will escort you out." "What?" My voice shot up, panic taking over. "You're firing me? You haven't even investigated this." "I don't need to investigate," he said coldly. "The evidence is right in front of me. You're lucky I'm not calling the cops." I stood there, frozen, as the weight of his words hit me. My career was over. Everything I'd worked for was gone in an instant. And I had no idea who was behind it, or why. The walk back to my desk felt like a death march. My coworkers avoided my eyes as I packed up my things. Word had already spread. I could feel their judgment, their pity. I didn't say a word as the security guard led me to the elevator and out of the building. The ride home was a blur. My head pounded, my heart raced, and the only thought in my mind was, who did this to me? I didn't have to wait long to find out. That evening, after hours of pacing my apartment and spiraling into despair, I got a text. It was from an unknown number, and it was simple: "How's unemployment treating you?" I stared at it, my hands shaking. Whoever this was, they wanted me to know they were behind it. And they were taunting me. "Who are you?" I typed back, my fingers trembling. "Why are you doing this?" The response came almost immediately: "Meet me at the Rusty Nail tomorrow night. 9 p.m. Let's talk." The Rusty Nail was a dive bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where you kept one hand on your drink and the other on your wallet. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I didn't care. Whoever this was had ruined my life, and I needed answers. When I walked in, the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke hit me like a wall. The place was half empty, with a few regulars nursing their drinks in the corner. Then I saw him. Sitting at a table in the back, nursing a whiskey, was a face I hadn't seen in years: Neil. My cousin. The one person in my family who made Millridge feel even smaller. Neil had always been the black sheep, lazy, jealous, and always looking for a shortcut. We'd never been close, but I hadn't spoken to him in years. I thought he'd moved to Florida or something. "Fitz," he said, grinning as I approached. "Long time, no see." "You?" I spat, my voice shaking with anger. "You did this?" He shrugged, taking a sip of his drink. "Don't act so surprised. You've been riding high for years. Someone had to knock you down a peg." "Why?" I slammed my hands on the table, making him flinch. "What the hell did I ever do to you?" "You existed," he said simply, his grin fading. "You got out. You made something of yourself. And every time I saw your name pop up on Facebook or Mom mentioned you at Thanksgiving, I had to hear how Fitz is doing so well. Meanwhile, I'm stuck scraping by, working crap jobs. You think that's fair? You ruined my life because you're jealous?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It wasn't personal," he said, though his smirk said otherwise. "It was business. I knew you'd bounce back. Guys like you always do." I don't know what came over me. I wanted to lunge at him, to beat the smug look off his face. But I stopped myself. I had a better idea. "Enjoy your drink, Neil," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "You'll need it." I left the bar without another word. On the way home, my mind raced with a plan. Neil thought he was untouchable, but he'd underestimated me. The next day, I went to work. Not at Greystone, but at clearing my name. First, I contacted a friend who worked in IT, Carter, a guy who owed me a favor after I helped him land a job a few years back. He helped me dig into the emails and photos Neil had sent to Horace. It didn't take long to find the cracks. Neil had been sloppy. The metadata on the photos showed they'd been edited, and the email server logs pointed to an account created under a fake name but with Neil's IP address. Next, I hired a private investigator. It cost more than I wanted to spend, but it was worth it. Within a week, I had everything I needed: proof that Neil had faked the emails and photos, evidence that he'd used my identity to fabricate the whole scam, and even a recording the investigator got of Neil bragging about how he'd taken me down. I didn't take the evidence to Horace. Not yet. First, I wanted Neil to pay. I went back to the Rusty Nail the following week, carrying a flash drive with everything I'd gathered. Neil was there, as smug as ever. I slid the drive across the table. "What's this?" he asked, frowning. "Your confession," I said. And all the proof I need to take you down. He paled. You wouldn't. Watch me, I said, my voice icy. You think you're clever, Neil? You think you're untouchable? Guess what, now you're screwed. He tried to bluff, but I could see the panic in his eyes. What do you want? I want you to call Horace, I said. Tell him the truth. Clear my name. Then you're going to disappear. If I so much as hear your name again, I'll make sure everyone from the cops to your landlord sees what's on that drive. Got it? He nodded, sweating bullets. The next day, he made the call. Horace was stunned when I showed him the proof. He apologized, reinstated me, and even gave me the promotion back. Neil? He packed up and left town. I don't know where he went, and I don't care. As for me, I kept climbing. I won't lie, there's still a bitter taste in my mouth when I think about what happened. But I made it through. And every time I walk into my office, I remember one thing: never let anyone steal what you've worked for. And that's how I got my revenge. Satisfying, isn't it? Story 2. I'm not someone who checks phones. I believe that if you're looking for something, you'll find it, even if there's nothing to find. That's the kind of person I've always been, or at least that's what I told myself. I trusted Rigby. We'd been married 12 years, had 2 kids, and a life that looked good from the outside. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. That night, everything changed. Rigby had just gotten home from work, later than usual. He said he had to finish up a project at the office. That wasn't uncommon. He worked for a steel company, and his job always seemed to demand long hours. I didn't question it. I'd spent the evening cleaning up after dinner, helping Mila with her math homework, and telling Jareth to brush his teeth for the 100th time. Just another normal night. I was in the living room folding laundry when Rigby left his phone on the coffee table and went to take a shower. That caught my attention. He never left his phone lying around. He was one of those people who took it everywhere, kitchen, bathroom, you name it. I used to tease him about it. But that night, he didn't. It was just sitting there. Then it buzzed. I glanced at it without thinking. A single message lit up the screen. Can't wait to see you again, winking face. My heart stopped. I told myself it was nothing. Probably just a joke from one of his coworkers or something harmless. But something about the way he'd been acting lately crept into my mind. He'd been distant. Distracted. He wasn't cruel or anything, just different. Less present. I brushed it off at the time because life was busy and exhausting. But now, with that message staring back at me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I shouldn't have done it. I know I shouldn't have. But I picked up his phone. The message was from someone named AITA. Not a name I recognized. I hesitated, debating with myself, but curiosity got the better of me. I tapped on the notification, and it opened their text thread. What I saw made my stomach churn. There were dozens of messages. Flirty ones. Explicit ones. Details about meeting up. Mentions of hotels. Times and dates. My hands started shaking as I scrolled, and the words blurred together. One message hit me harder than the others. It's like I can finally breathe when I'm with you. Tears stung my eyes. I wanted to put the phone down, but I couldn't stop reading. This wasn't just some fling, it sounded like a full-blown relationship. They talked about their future and getting away from it all. He'd even sent her pictures, selfies he'd taken on nights when he'd told me he was working late. The sound of the shower turning off jolted me back to reality. My heart was racing. I locked the phone and put it back on the table, trying to act normal. I couldn't let him know I'd seen it. Not yet. My mind was spinning, and I didn't know what to do. When Rigby came downstairs, he looked at me, then at his phone. His face changed. He didn't say anything at first, but I could tell he knew. He picked up the phone and turned it over in his hand, his jaw tightening. Everything okay? He asked, his voice calm but sharp, like he was testing me. Yeah, I said, trying to sound normal. Why? He stared at me for a moment, then shrugged. No reason. He turned and walked upstairs, phone in hand. That should have been it. I should have confronted him right then and there. But I didn't. I froze. I kept telling myself I needed more proof, more time to figure out what was really happening. The truth is, I was scared. Scared of what it all meant. Scared of what would happen to our family if I was right. The next day, while Rigby was at work, I couldn't stop thinking about the messages. My mind was racing, replaying everything I'd read and wondering how long this had been going on. I couldn't just let it go. I needed answers. I decided to dig deeper. I started with his emails. Rigby had a laptop he kept in our home office, and I knew the password. He'd given it to me years ago, back when trust wasn't something I even thought about. I told myself it was just to confirm what I already knew, but a part of me hoped I'd find nothing, that maybe the texts were just a weird joke or misunderstanding. They weren't. His inbox was full of messages from AITA. They'd been emailing for months, maybe longer. There were receipts for hotel bookings, flight confirmations, and dinner reservations. My heart sank as I pieced it all together. Every time he told me he was working late or out of town for a conference, he'd been with her. But it wasn't just the messages. There were photos too. Pictures of the two of them together, laughing, holding hands, even kissing. They looked happy. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, and my hands were trembling so much I could barely scroll. This was my husband. The father of my children. And he had another life. As I sat there staring at the screen, a thought crossed my mind that made me feel sick. What if she wasn't the only one? What if there were others? I couldn't bring myself to look. I felt like I was going to throw up. I closed the laptop and sat there in silence, trying to process everything. That's when my phone buzzed. It was Rigby. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. He rarely called me during the day, and I wasn't ready to talk to him. But something told me I needed to answer. I swiped to pick up the call, my voice shaking as I said, "Hello?" His tone was cold and flat. "You shouldn't have seen that." My blood ran cold. I froze when I heard his voice. He knew. Somehow, he knew I had seen the texts. My mind raced. How did he find out? I'd put everything back exactly as it was. I stayed silent, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles ached. "Are you there?" Rigby asked, his voice still calm but sharp. "I know you saw the messages." My throat was dry, but I forced myself to speak. "What messages?" "Don't play dumb," he snapped. "You shouldn't have seen them. And now you're going to regret it." Before I could respond, he hung up. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Regret it? What did he mean? I felt like I was in a bad dream, but the pain in my chest told me this was all too real. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I wasn't going to let him intimidate me. I spent the rest of the day digging. Every time I thought I'd uncover the worst of it, I found something else. Bank statements showed withdrawals and charges I couldn't explain, fancy restaurants, gifts from jewelry stores, even a down payment for a condo in Pittsburgh. He was building a whole other life with her. I felt rage boiling inside me. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a complete and calculated lie. Then I found the most damning evidence of all, a folder of documents on his laptop labeled plans. Inside were blueprints for what I can only call an escape route. He was planning to leave me. He'd been slowly moving money into a secret account. He had a timeline, and it wasn't far off. The condo in Pittsburgh wasn't just for him and Arietta to play house, it was their new home. My hands shook as I read his notes. "Tell Marla it's over. Be firm." That's me. Marla. My own husband had scripted how he was going to dump me. I wasn't going to wait for him to pull the trigger. If he wanted to play dirty, fine. I'd show him just how dirty I could be. I spent the next week carefully collecting every piece of evidence I could find. The texts, emails, photos, financial records. I copied everything onto a flash drive and backed it up online. I also started talking to a lawyer. Thankfully, I knew someone through a friend who specialized in cases like mine. He called Rigby's behavior marital fraud and assured me we could use the evidence to secure not only a divorce but also a financial settlement that would leave him with nothing. I wasn't just planning to end the marriage. I was planning to destroy him. But I wasn't done yet. I had one last ace up my sleeve. Rigby thought he was smarter than me, but he made one mistake. He underestimated just how much I could endure when my family was on the line. I wasn't just going to take him down for me, I was going to do it for Mila and Jareth too. They deserved better than a lying, scheming father who thought he could have it all. The night of my revenge came a few weeks later. Rigby had told me he was going on a work trip again. I knew exactly where he was going, the condo in Pittsburgh. He didn't know I'd installed a tracking app on his phone. He also didn't know I'd spent the past week preparing. I showed up at the condo unannounced. It was a sleek, modern building with a doorman who looked surprised when I marched past him without a word. I knew the unit number, of course. When I got to the door, I didn't knock. I used the spare key I'd found in Rigby's office at home. My hands were steady as I turned the lock. Inside, I found them. Rigby and Arietta. They were sitting on the couch, drinking wine like they didn't have a care in the world. Arietta looked shocked when she saw me. Rigby, on the other hand, jumped to his feet, his face turning pale. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The wine glasses, the cozy setup, the shocked expressions on their faces, it was all going to be part of my case. Rigby tried to grab my phone, but I stepped back. "You're not stopping me," I said, my voice calm but cold. "I know everything. I have the texts, the emails, the bank records. And now I have this." Arietta turned to Rigby, panic on her face. "What is she talking about?" "Don't worry," I said, glaring at Rigby. "You'll find out soon enough." Before they could say anything else, I turned and walked out. I could hear Rigby yelling after me, but I didn't stop. I didn't need to. My revenge was already in motion. The fallout was swift and brutal. My lawyer filed for divorce the next day, citing adultery and financial misconduct. The evidence I'd collected left no room for argument. Rigby didn't just lose the condo in Pittsburgh, he lost our house, most of his savings, and custody of the kids. The judge had no sympathy for a man who'd not only cheated but also tried to hide money and abandon his family. But the best part? I didn't just take everything he had. I made sure everyone knew why. I sent copies of the evidence to his boss, his parents, and even a few mutual friends. His reputation was ruined. He lost his job, his relationship with AITA fell apart under the weight of the scandal, and he ended up moving into a dingy apartment on the outskirts of town. As for me, I rebuilt my life. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Mila and Jareth are thriving now, and I'm finally at peace. Rigby thought he could lie, cheat, and walk away unscathed. He was wrong. Sometimes revenge is the only way to remind people that actions have consequences.